only involves your sympathetic nervous system. And this refers to the dilation or constriction of the blood vessels. Okay? So in lab, I drew that diagram where you had a blood vessel. A specific diameter. Let's say this diameter of this blood vessel, just for the heck of it, is 10 millimeters across. Okay? You do vasoconstriction. And let's say it goes down to 5 millimeters. Okay? And then you dilate, vasodilate, and it's going to go wide to 20 millimeters. Okay? So the constriction means that the smooth muscle has contracted, making that vessel more narrow. Dilation means that the smooth muscle has relaxed, widening the diameter of that vessel. Okay? If you inhibit or turn off your sympathetic nervous system, it leads to dilation. If you stimulate your SNS, you're going to get constriction. So during a stress response, during a fight or flight response, SNS is going to activate. Your vessels are going to constrict to increase blood pressure, to increase blood flow to vital organs. So turning on or turning off your sympathetic nervous system controls dilation or constriction. Now this regulates what's called TPR. TPR is something I might have mentioned in the previous slides. TPR refers to your total peripheral resistance. Total peripheral resistance refers to keep things simplified. So the total peripheral resistance refers to the major factor of regulating resistance, which is the constriction and dilation. So total peripheral resistance refers to how wide or narrow the vessels are. Okay? So you can essentially help control blood pressure. If your blood pressure is high, are your blood vessels going to constrict or dilate? If it's high.
Dilate.
Right, you're gonna get more space, right? If it's low, those vessels are gonna hug the blood, right? Right. Good. Right. And this is a diagram from your book that illustrates this. So this diagram from your book, and there's also a similar animation in the post of the blackboard, where you have kind of walks you through where you have the baroreceptors, okay? You have an increased blood pressure, okay, which is going to stimulate those baroreceptors. Those baroreceptors are going to start firing, right? They're going to start firing. They're going to work through the glossopharyngeal nerve, cranial nerve 9, okay? It's going to relay the information to, in this case, it's relaying information to the cardiac inhibitory center. And I know that because the output is through the vagus nerve, cranial nerve 10. The vagus nerve is then going to regulate heart rate at the SA node. So then it decreases SA node, which is going to decrease heart rate.
Is this a negative or is this a positive feedback loop?
Negative.
Okay.
Because it's going to, negative feedback is because it's going to slow down the heart rate, which is slow down the heart rate. If you slow down the heart rate, you're going to decrease the blood pressure, which essentially is going to fix the problem. So it kind of gives you an idea of how that flows. Right? There's an animation So this is a diagram or a kind of a scenario that will help you with that question 6 in the case study. Okay? So in the case study, it asks you to compare, it asks you to explain the scenario of low blood pressure. Okay? This is a scenario that explains a person that has high blood pressure. Okay? So if you have high blood pressure, the body's goal is to decrease blood pressure. Right? And if it's high, it wants to get it low. If it's low, it wants to get it high. Right? So there's two things that are typos that gotta be fixed. So here you have SA neural firing. This should be a downward arrow. And then AV neural delay, this should be an upward arrow.
Is this reversed?
No, they're just not there at all.
Oh, okay.
I don't know why not. Okay, so if you walk through it, you have high blood pressure. Okay? High blood pressure is the problem. That's going to cause your baroreceptors to increase firing. Okay? So what do you think happens to your receptors if you have low blood pressure? Decrease firing, right? Good. So basically the point I'm trying to make when we go through this and that problem that you have on the case study is that essentially the scenarios are the opposite of each other, right? So essentially the answer to the case study is opposite to this answer here. Does that make sense? Okay, so you have the baroreceptors are going to increase their firing rate. Now we have to think about what happens with these three centers. Okay? So we talked about the cardiac acceleratory center. Okay? Now do we want that center to be turned on or turned off?
Turned off.
Off, right? Because you don't want to, you want to slow the heart down. You don't want increased pressure anymore, right? So you inhibit it, which is going to decrease SA neural firing and increase AV neural delay, which is going to increase heart rate. You're going to decrease the contractility, which is going to decrease stroke volume. Okay? And through that equation that I keep writing to help you remember, is you decrease cardiac output, you're going to decrease blood pressure. So you're turning off the stimulatory center. You don't want to stimulate things, you want to chill things out. Okay? But you have that cardiac inhibitory center. Okay? So the inhibitory center, its job is to inhibit the heart function, right? So you want to turn that on actually. And you can see that the effects are the same. These effects here are the same as these effects here. So by turning on the inhibitory center, you're going to have the same effect as turning off the acceleratory center. So they work together. Turning off the acceleratory center and turning on the inhibitory center, you're going to work together to decrease cardiac output. If we decrease cardiac output, you're going to decrease blood pressure. Okay? So they have a cooperative effect or a team effect, where if you turn off one and turn on the other, they're going to help promote the same result. Okay? Then you have that vasomotor center, where we said if you inhibit it, if you turn it off, that minus sign just means turn off or inhibit. If you inhibit it, the vessels are going to dilate. If you dilate the vessel, you're going to decrease your resistance. If you decrease your resistance, Dilation is going to decrease your resistance, which is going to decrease blood pressure. So the actions of each center, or the response of each center, promotes the decrease in blood pressure. And that decrease in blood pressure is then going to fix the problem. Does that make sense?
Yep.
You kind of walk through that?
Yeah.
Do you have any questions about it? Okay.
So if we're doing the opposite for the case study, when it says the CIC is activated, are we deactivating it?
Right, because you want to, because you have so if you have low blood pressure, right? Let's say you had low blood pressure, and this stayed on. If this stayed on, what would happen to blood pressure then? Lower, right? It's going to drop it even more. Yep, good. So that's the exact connection I want you to make. If this happens during high blood pressure, then now let's apply it to a low pressure scenario.
The opposite happens, right?
Exactly. Bingo.
Yep. Okay.
Yep. So you just walk through it, and you can use the same kind of format and just kind of outline it. Make sure you use the proper terms in the question. Make sure you answer the question completely. But that kind of shows you helps you make that connection. So all of these serve to decrease the blood pressure, right, which is going to fix the initial problem. Right. Now this animation here is going to show you. So this animation is going to show you an example of what we just talked about.
Increased blood pressure stretches the carotid arteries and aorta, causing the baroreceptors to increase their basal rate of action potential generation. Action potentials are conducted by the glossopharyngeal and vagus nerves to the cardioregulatory and vasomotor centers in the medulla oblongata. As a result of increased stimulation from the baroreceptors, the cardioregulatory center increases parasympathetic stimulation to the heart, which decreases the heart rate. Also, as a result of the increased stimulation from the baroreceptors, the cardiovascular center decreases sympathetic stimulation to the heart, which decreases heart rate and stroke volume. The vasomotor center decreases sympathetic stimulation to blood vessels, causing vasodilation. The vasodilation, along with the decreased heart rate and decreased stroke volume, bring the elevated blood pressure back toward normal. If the initial problem were a decrease in blood pressure, the activities and effects of the baroreceptors, cardiovascular center, and vasomotor center would be the opposite of what is illustrated.
Now you have long-term control of blood pressure, okay? You have long-term control of blood pressure, which is a little bit different in that it doesn't involve the nervous system at all. Doesn't involve the nervous system at all, which after we talk about it, it'll make sense. Why it doesn't? Because it's long-term control, so it's a little bit slower. So you can think about the nervous system as being maybe a little bit too fast. So long-term control we're talking about, so short-term is minutes to hours. This we're talking about, days to weeks to months, over a long period of time. Now this is a non-emergent response. This is more of a long-term response. And it involves what's called the renin angiotensin aldosterone system. Now you might have heard of renin. Some people call it renin. Tomato. Renin, and aldosterone. We talked about the endocrine system in AMP1, depending on what hormones your instructor included. Now it's a non-emergent response working through hormones. Okay? So hormones, if you remember, hormones are chemical messengers. Chemical messengers released by glands. Okay, so think of the glands. You've learned about thyroid gland, secretes thyroid hormone. You have your pancreas that secretes insulin and glucagon. Okay? So it's a series of biochemical reactions to yield a hormonal effect. Okay? Hormonal effect is going to be a slower effect. Slower effect because hormones take longer to work than neurons and neurotransmitters. Okay? So the goal here is to increase blood volume in order to increase blood pressure. We'll work through the next slide to kind of show you how that works. Now the organs involved are organs that you might not think would be involved. Your liver, kidney, and lungs. Okay? You don't even see a heart. Okay? You don't see a brain. Okay? So it's kind of, it might not be what you think originally. Okay? But if you look at this diagram here, it shows you how things are going to work together and what their effects are. So on top there, I can't drop there, but on top of the screen you have a drop in blood pressure. So the stimulus, or what stimulates this, is a decrease in blood flow. Is going to cause a decrease in blood pressure. And that's going to be sensed by the kidney. Okay? So the kidney has specialized cells that can sense or recognize a decreased blood pressure, okay, due to a decreased blood flow. Okay? Now the kidney in response is going to secrete a hormone called renin. Okay? Renin or renin, I call it renin, some people call it renin. It's an enzyme, actually, that's going to convert angiotensinogen into angiotensin 1. Okay? Angiotensinogen is a plasma protein. It's always in your blood plasma. It circulates. It's most often circulates in the off position, the off state. Okay? And then when needed, renin will convert it to angiotensin 1. Okay? Now angiotensin 1 is a protein, a short protein, 10 amino acids long, goes through your bloodstream, travels through your lungs. It's going to become in contact with an enzyme called ACE, angiotensin converting enzyme. That enzyme converts angiotensin 1 to angiotensin 2. Okay? I'll just write it as Ang2. Angiotensin 2, up here, kind of, it might be hard to see, angiotensin 1. Okay? Now, angiotensin 2 is the most important molecule of this pathway. Okay? Because angiotensin 2 has multiple effects. It can stimulate your hypothalamus, which is the site of your thirst center. So it turns on your thirst center and makes you thirsty, and you drink water.
Or soda.
What happens to your blood volume?
It increases.
Right. So if you increase drinking fluid, you're going to increase blood volume, which is going to increase your blood pressure. So basically you drink more fluid. There's more fluid in your body, more blood plasma, so it increases your blood pressure. Okay? It's also a very powerful vasoconstrictor. So it causes your blood vessels to narrow, okay? Constrict, smaller diameter. Okay? And a vasoconstriction, as we said, will elevate blood pressure. Okay? Now the next thing that it does is that angiotensin II is going to stimulate your adrenal cortex. Your adrenal cortex is a glandular organ that sits on top of each kidney. You have two of them because you have two kidneys. It's like a hat on top of the kidney. Now what it does is it secretes many hormones, but one of the hormones the hormone that we're concerned about right now is called aldosterone. Okay? Aldosterone. I'll write it out here. So aldosterone. Okay. Now aldosterone is a hormone that causes the kidney to reabsorb water and salt back into the bloodstream. Okay. So the aldosterone causes the kidney to reabsorb salt and water, okay, which is referred to here as salt and water retention. So if you increase salt, sodium, and you increase water uptake, you're going to increase the blood volume, which is going to increase blood pressure. So all three of these responses, 1, 2, 3, they all have the common goal of increasing blood pressure by either vasoconstriction or increasing the blood volume. Okay.
So it only does like whatever it needs to do all three to get the job done.
It would.
So it has to do all three.
Yeah, I'm not numbering them in order. This might be confusing. So I'm not numbering them in any specific order. I'm just saying that there are three. Yes, but it would be wherever the molecule would be is where it would happen. Yeah.
Because it's not like the nervous system response. It takes a minute, right? It takes
Right.
what? You said days to months?
It would take, well, this response would be, it would take a couple days for this to, days to kick in.
Okay.
And this is how your blood volume, this is how your blood pressure is controlled the majority of the time.
Right.
Yep.
So is this what happens when people have low blood pressure? Is the reaction in your body seems to bring it back up?
So, I'm sorry?
So this is what happens when your body has low blood pressure. It goes into this mode to bring it back up.
Over the long term. Yep. But if it's like it drops suddenly, like let's say, so like an example of that is let's say you're running late for class or running late for work and you oversleep and you ever like jump out of bed really fast.
Yeah.
You get dizzy. You're like, whoa. Okay? You feel woozy, kind of dizzy, because you stood up so fast, the baroreceptors didn't have time to kick in. So that short-term response is through baroreceptors. This would be more long-term. Okay? So if you go to that case study, just to pull up that last question. Go to this last question, it will make more sense now. Since we went through this section. Okay. So it says, question 6. Question 6, there's multiple parts to it. So it says baroreceptors are pressure sensors located in the aortic arch and carotid sinus that respond to rapid changes in blood pressure. Okay? In turn, they relay electrical signals to the cardiac control center. Okay? So then it walks you through kind of what we talked about. Where is the cardiac control center located in the brain? What part of the brain? Medulla oblongata, right? So that's the medulla oblongata. And then that's part A. And then what three components make up the cardiac control center? Which three centers? Right, so the cardiac acceleratory center, cardiac inhibitory center, and the vasomotor center.
Do you have to put what, they're not gonna deactivate it?
Not yet. So this is just kind of just set the stage. Right? So that just tells me that you know that we're in the medulla oblongata, and we're dealing with these three centers. Vasomotor centers. Okay, the vasomotor center. Now this next part is where you have to kind of use the example in the notes to work through. Right? So it says, how does each component, so when I say component, I mean the CAC, CIC, vasomotor center. You can outline it just like I did in the notes. How does each component respond under the circumstance of low blood pressure? So if the pressure is low, okay, so if the pressure is low, so if your pressure you can diagram it out like this. So we'll diagram it out, and then you just gotta make sure you go in and kind of tidy it up to make sure you have all the proper words and stuff. But we have the medulla oblongata. Okay. Now that medulla oblongata has the cardiac control center. Okay. Now you have the medulla oblongata. You're going to have those three centers. You're going to have the CAC, which is the acceleratory center. You're going to have the CIC, which is the inhibitory center. And then you're going to have the vasomotor center. Okay? So it says, how does each component respond to low blood pressure? So our problem is that the blood pressure is too low. Decreased blood pressure, okay, is going to be sensed by the medulla oblongata. Okay? So our goal, or solution, our goal is to increase blood pressure. But it's low, we want to get it to high. Okay? So it says, be sure to include the following terms in your explanation: heart rate, stroke volume, cardiac output, total peripheral resistance, contractility, SA nodal firing, A nodal delay, so on and so forth. Okay? So based on that example we went through, we know that the cardiac acceleratory center, is going to, you have three factors. You're going to have SA nodal firing. You have SA nodal firing. AV nodal delay. AV nodal delay. And then we're going to have the contractility, the ventricular contractility. So are these going to, so is the SA nodal firing going to decrease or increase?
Increase.
It's going to increase, right?
Yep.
If you have low, this is going to increase. The AV nodal delay is going to decrease because we want to go faster, don't want to hesitate. Contractility
It's gonna increase.
It's gonna increase. Okay, and then this is going to, your heart rate is gonna increase, your stroke volume is gonna increase, which is gonna increase your cardiac output, which is going to increase blood pressure. Okay, and then with the cardiac inhibitory center, you have the SA nodal firing and the AV nodal delay. But we have don't worry about contractility because the parasympathetic, the vagus nerve does not go to the ventricles. So we're going to have increased nodal firing and decreased AV nodal delay. So if this is increasing SA nodal firing, is this center on or off?
On?
On,
On.
right?
Yeah.
Right? I'm probably blocking your view. So this is on. Positive just means on.
I can't.
Right? Now the inhibitory center, if it's increasing heart rate, is that on or off? It's off, right?
Yeah,
Because it's inhibitor.
Right.
yeah.
Good. Good. And so then you're going to have an increased heart rate, which is going to lead to increased cardiac output, which is going to increase blood pressure. Okay. Now you have the vasomotor center. Vasomotor center, is that going to be on or off? Do we have to constrict or dilate?
Constrict.
We got to constrict. So does that mean is it on or off?
It's on.
On. Okay.
Mhm.
On because it's actually doing something.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's going to be constricting rather than dilating. So it's going to be on. Think about your stress response. So it's going to be stimulating. You're going to have vasoconstriction. Vasoconstriction is going to increase your total peripheral resistance. It's going to increase resistance. It's going to increase blood pressure. And then we use all the terms that we need to use. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah. Makes clear sense.
And maybe you can share that with,
Deshara. Deja.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
The whole room.
Yeah, I mean, just maybe email me and I'll send you to YouTube. I'll try to get